GCFR for doing us the honor of attending this event. I think that when he was in power, relationship between him and us, the media, has not been a very easy one. But it does show that he understands that a lot of these things are not done out of malice. I think it is about a relationship between truth and power. And I would venture to say that were he to ask the current occupants of the villa, he will find that the relationship is not much different. Indeed, just as he's here to attend our occasion, I do look forward to some of my friends in the villa that when they leave power, will all come back to doing these things again, to being together again. So, Mr. President, thank you for coming. Thank you, distinguished speakers, John Nwodo, Atahiru Jega, the special guests that represent various groups. I all want to thank also our online audience, people who are not able to join us because of the special nature of the situation we're in, and even the wider television audience out there who are watching what we are doing today. Now, even without the COVID-19 pandemic and a second recession in 5 years, Nigeria is a very troubled country. There is widespread dissatisfaction in the land, but then perhaps it's fair to ask, when have Nigerians ever been satisfied? Also, if it is any comfort to us, to all of us, let me say that we are not alone in our despair as a country. We're in the good company of Trump's USA, Brexit Britain, post-election Ghana, COVID-challenged South Africa, and actually even Bobi Wine's Uganda and Tunisia after the Arab Spring. But I think that what is special about Nigeria is that while the natives are permanently restless, there is no sense of urgency from their government. Let me qualify that a little by saying that when it is threatened, as during the EndSARS protest we saw recently, the Buhari government can go into overdrive, sending ministers back to their constituencies. But then matters quickly return to the old normal. The default positions is to wait on events, issue press statements in response to recurring outrages, display pictures of meetings and briefings on television, and repeat promises of better days to come. But in the seeming absence of systematic planning and diligent follow-up, small gains are lost and progress is stalled. This lack of vision and vigor has affected everything, including dealing with urgent national issues, one of which is the agitation for restructuring, which is the subject of our discussion today. I think you will recall that during its campaigns, the ruling party pledged to introduce constitutional changes that will establish what was called true federalism. Indeed, it even set up a committee headed by Governor Nasir El-Rufai of Kaduna State, which, in its own recommendations, accepted many of the popular ideas of restructuring, including state police, revised formula of revenue sharing, and the abolition of the local government tier, as we know it today. According to Chief Shogun Oshoba, a gentleman you recall was the former governor of Ogun State, and one of the leading lights of the APC, the El-Rufai report was actually discussed, adjusted, and adopted at all levels of the party, including the all-powerful National Executive Committee. But not much has been heard about the El-Rufai report since the APC was re-elected to a second term, I think about 2 years ago now. Indeed, Oshoba said that he's shocked that, and I'm quoting him here, that some people sat on the report, which in actual fact had gone through all the organs of the party, which had in attendance the president and the governors. This is the end of quote. Well, there is another election coming soon to Nigeria, and I think the APC has to decide what to do with this hot potato. We at the Daily Trust are making our own contribution to this by putting together this exceptional panel, which has both depth and breadth to offer such insights and ideas. It is to be chaired by the former president, Dr. Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, who, as you recall, did convene the 2014 Constitutional Conference, but left office before he could implement his report. We will soon hear from Chief Ayo Adebanjo, who is perhaps the oldest practicing politician in Nigeria, in my reckoning. He was born in 1928 and has been in the Zikis movement, in the Action Group, and currently in the Pan-Yoruba Afenifere as one of his leaders. So the chief has lived through some of the finest and ugliest moments of Nigerian history. From the constitutional processes, the struggle for independence, party politics, civil war, military rule, and the return to democracy. I think it is a very rare thing to reach 90 years, which he has, and rarer still to be involved in the politics of your country into ripe old age. Chief John Nwodo has just finished his tenure as the 9th president of the Ohanaeze Indibo, the socio-cultural group that represents the interests of the Igbos in Nigeria and I think worldwide. He was a minister of the Federal Republic twice. I think the first time as a stripling young man, if I recall well, under President Shehu Shagari, which is nearly 40 years ago. And then under General Abdulsalami Abubakar in the last military regime, which again is over 20 years now. But he's still shy of 70. So I think many more can maybe hear from him in 2023 politics. Professor Atahiru Jega is my generation, but has also developed an early sense of responsibility, both personally and professionally. Still in his early 60s, he was president of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, more than 30 years ago, Vice Chancellor of Bayero University, Kano, and even his chairmanship of INEC was a full 7 years ago. I think that each of these three main speakers has brought something unique to the table, a blend of knowledge, character, and experience, which are the building blocks of any serious enterprise. So let me finish this short welcome with a few questions of my own. Was Nigeria really ever a great place to be? Can it be made great again? You recall the man who made this slogan popular, left his country not so great recently. What is at the heart of our national dilemma? Is it the structure or the culture? Is the problem the absence of any particular set of laws or the prevalence of much lawlessness? I'm not asking our panel to answer all these questions. I have no doubt they will raise issues that they think are relevant, and we'll hear words of wisdom from them. We may even live here better citizens. The question is whether that will translate into a collective resolve to build a better Nigeria. Thank you very much.
But I acknowledge the presence of eminent leaders, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I commend the Daily Trust Media Group for keeping up with this dialogue series for the past 18 years. As a media organization, you have been doing a lot to contribute to nation building. But let me admit that some of your editorials are sometimes tough on leaders. And the chairman of the board also attests to that. And I can remember that I also have a good share of it when I was in office. I understand that Hall was in a bid to guide the efforts towards building a greater country for us all. And as leaders, we have a duty and responsibility to listen to all voices, no matter how bitter some might sound to us. Today, you have brought us together to have a conversation on restructuring, which is one of the major issues in our national discourse. And I commend the paper presented by the chairman of the board. I'm happy that the discussants here are eminent personalities that will do justice to the topic. I commend the Daily Trust Media Group for bringing these eminent Nigerians together to brainstorm on this topical issue that has seized the attention of our country. Chief Ayo Adebanjo, I didn't say much again because the board chairman has already explained who he is. A leader of the Afenifere, prominent member of the Zekis movement, attended most of our conferences that were conferences designed to shape this country. Chief John Nia Wodo, just left the Indigo Cultural Organization as the national president, and now the leader of the Southern and Middle Belt Forum. We commend you and congratulate you for this your new assignment. Of course, Atairu Muhammadu Jega, because he was the chair of INEC, so everybody knows so much about him, because he's a professor of political science, so I know it will lead us through. And when he was the president of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, it was a period when civil society confronted the guns. So he knows it all. The concept of restructuring is not new to us as Nigerians. Before the Civil War, Nigeria operated with 4 regions. At the onset of the war, General Yakubu Gowon, then head of state, thought that running Nigeria under the regional structure posed a threat to the unity and sovereignty of our country. So we opted to restructure Nigeria into 12 states. There were mixed reactions, for and against, across the nation by our people. But at the end, the 12-state structure remained. What General Yakubu did in a war situation preserved our nation and saved us from disintegration. A nation is an organic being whose life is characterized by reforms, adaptation, and structural changes. At independence in 1960, the population of Nigeria was about 45 million. And our early leaders and the British colonial government decided that the young nation was too vast and complex to be governed centrally from Lagos. Thus, they bequeathed a federal system of government with strong regional autonomy and a unifying central government. This arrangement was also accepted and reaffirmed by the Republican Constitution of 1963. 61 years after independence, our population is now estimated to have exploded to over 200 million people. In the same vein, the call for restructuring has continued to grow and is growing louder every day. Within these 6 decades, our political space has assumed many colorations. We have gone from the 3 regions to 36 states and 774 local government councils. And we moved away from when the different regions have a different arrangement to manage the local government level to a unified local government system across the country. Yet, all that did not seem to have provided an answer to the questions on the administrative structure of our country and how best it should be governed. As president, I had the privilege of celebrating our nation's Golden Jubilee in 2010 and the centenary of our amalgamation in 2014. When we were to celebrate these milestones, some Nigerians challenged our intentions, arguing that the amalgamation was faulty. They insisted that there were no reasons to celebrate because they believe that the amalgamation has not helped the growth of our country. My belief is that all nations have their unique history. Professor Jiga will tell us, as a professor of political science, the amalgamation is not the problem, by my belief. Rather, there was too much emphasis on divisive politics, and this has greatly affected our nation's unity. It was the need to address these issues that my administration elected 6 years ago to convene the 2014 National Conference, which I inaugurated on March 17, 2014, in Abuja, for the specific purpose of addressing some of the issues that have been agitating the minds of our people. As a country, we have our peculiar challenges, and we should devise means of solving them. But we should not continue to vent our spleen on the amalgamation. As Shakespeare in Julius Caesar said, the fault is not in our stars, but in ourselves. My conviction is that discussion on restructuring will not help except we restructure our minds, because some of the challenges or some of the challenging issues at the national level still exist at the state and local levels. In Nigeria, it's very easy for people to point at the central government because I was there and I felt the pulse. But sometimes what is happening at the center, it also happens at the state level at the local government level and sometimes even in our communities. There are some states that, based on the part of the map of the state that you come from, or the language you speak, or how you worship your God, you can't even try to contest election as a governor. Nobody will even look at you. Go through how states conduct their local government elections. For example, in this country, the guy will know more because he was the chair of INEC. There are some states that when the national electoral body conduct the general elections, opposition parties could win some seats in the state assembly. They can win some seats in the National Assembly, both House of Rep and Senate. But when we get to the local elections that the state governors will conduct, those parties that probably even have one senator and some 2-3 members of House of Rep and some 5 members of the state assembly can't even win a councillorship seat. Not to talk about a chairmanship seat. Do we need restructuring to solve that anomaly? And how do we restructure to make sure that those things don't happen again? This shows that restructuring alone may not solve all the anomalies in our system. I believe that restructuring for a better nation is good, but there are other fundamental issues we should also address. We cannot restructure in isolation without tackling the challenges that polarize our nation. These include nepotism, ethnic and religious differences, as well as lack of patriotism. The issues of tribe and religion have continued to limit our unity and progress as a nation. Let me tell you a bitter experience. I cannot say a bitter experience, but funny conversation I had with a teacher. He happens to be one of my former students. And as I left office, I was freer, so more people can come to me. And he said, Mr. President, what we are seeing in some of the schools, especially around Abuja and some of these areas, is that sometimes, even at the primary level, it's so difficult for Muslim children and Christian children to sit together and play. There's this kind of mutual suspicion. It may not be happening in all the schools, but the teacher told me, and I felt it because I know most of us here who attended schools in those days, primary school and secondary schools, that Muslims and Christians stay together and there are no mutual suspicion. You don't see any of them as an enemy. And it reminds me some time ago when I read a short story by late Gabriel Okara on children literature. It's a story titled Little Snake and Little Frog. And that story goes that there was a day the little frog, the baby frog and the baby snake went to play, and they enjoyed themselves playing. And both of them went home. And when Mama Frog asked Little Frog, who did you play with? I said, oh, I played with a little snake. Then Mama Frog warned, look, those are the people that eat us. Don't play with, when you see them, run away. And when the baby snake went home, the mama snake also asked, who did you play with? And the baby snake said, I play with Little Frog. And the mama snake said, that is our food. When next you see, just eat it. The following morning, baby frog and baby snake went out again. They met somewhere. From a distance, baby frog stopped. Was no longer moving. Now baby snake said, come, let us play, come. Then the baby frog said, no, what your mom told you, my mom also told me. And baby frog turned back and started running back home. Some of our conversations in this country is taking the dimension of baby frog and baby snakes. We are making our children to hate themselves instead of our children coming together collectively to build a nation. Leadership is like giving care to a sick person. Society and individuals are almost the same. If you have major problems, sometimes the drugs doctors will prescribe at the first level of treatment will be different as we continue to progress and improve. So it's nation building. I would like to refer us to the experiences of 2 African countries which attempted to tackle the problem of diversity from a different perspective than ours at independence. Tanzania under the leadership of Julius Nyerere, and Ghana under Kwame Nkrumah. I may not go to specifics because there are professors of political science here. They went to the extreme to advocate one-party state, which leaned towards the left. We were first a bit to the left. Both leaders emphasized strong national government to promote national unity and patriotism, which departed from our own regional approach, which was based on strong regional parties and political competition for power between the regions. From independence, the struggle was, our politics was based on regions. And there was this tension. It's a dynamic duo between the regions who will produce the national leaders. And that is still haunting us till today. Let me state for the record that I strongly oppose both the philosophy and the idea of one-party state. No, I don't believe that is the best. As well as a unitary system of government as a solution to ethnic and cultural diversity. That cannot solve the problems. I believe that federalism and liberal multi-party democracy offer by far the best opportunities for good governance in a multi-ethnic nation like Nigeria. Yet, it is obvious that the initial emphasis of Tanzania and Ghana on promoting national unity, patriotism among citizens, and strong national parties that cut across ethnic, regional, and religious divides, and leadership orientation that promotes fairness, justice for all, and love of country have helped both Ghana and Tanzania in their journey of nationhood. It has helped them to better manage some of the extreme ethnic and religious divisions that have dampened the unity and progress of our own country. I remember last October I was in Tanzania. I led the African Union team to observe their elections, and I had a conversation with the foreign minister, a cerebral professor of law, quite a senior person. And he told me, we were looking at the Nigerian structure and the Tanzanian structure. I said that he worked with Julius Nyerere, that sometimes some people don't know why Julius Nyerere opted for a one-party state. That was at that time, Tanzania was a very complex country, so many tribes, so many languages. And they have two major religions, Christianity and Islam. In Tanzania main area, Christianity and Islam is almost like 50-50. But Zanzibar, which is a semi-autonomous part of Tanzania, Muslims are just about 80 or even 80-something%. Christians, I believe, less than 20%. So you have that kind of structure. So that Julius Nyerere said he was going to do two things to unite his country. First was one-party state, that if he takes multi-parties, some parties will take religious angles and polarize the country based on religion. Some parties will take ethnic lines and will polarize the country based on ethnicity. Then the second thing he did was, these multiple languages they were speaking will not help them. And that he has to encourage one major language. And luckily for him, which in Nigeria we don't have, we have Pan-East African language, the Swahili. So encourage the teaching of Swahili at the primary and the secondary level, to the extent that all their textbooks were translated into Swahili. So Swahili and English become the lingua franca, and they emphasize more on Swahili that is even spoken by some of the tribes. So everybody now speaks Swahili. So in national conversation, they use Swahili. Even if you go to observe election, anybody, you can talk with anybody if you understand Swahili. Some after finishing secondary school, they are not even so fluent in English, but everybody speaks Swahili. So that one-party system and the common language that all of them use, try to unify them. They still have their political problems, but it's not based on religion, it's not based on tribe. But well, just like I say, every society evolves. When Julius Nyerere left later, the president then felt that they should go multi-party. And a referendum in 1992, a referendum was called, and 80% still voted for one party because they believe that one party is helping their unity. 20% voted for multi-party. Julius Nyerere was still alive then, but he encouraged them that, look, yes, 80% voted for one party, but the whole world is going multi-party. Tanzania cannot be left behind. So even though one-party state was 80%, but they now moved to multi-party. But even as they moved to multi-party, the Nyerere's party is still the only party that continues to win presidency till today. Another country that we may mention is Rwanda. Rwanda is another recent example where polarization on ethnic lines nearly destroyed that beautiful country in 1994, leading to extreme inter-ethnic hatred, anarchy, violence, and killings. It is the recent example of genocide. Today, Rwanda has stepped back from ethnic bigotry and division to a system that emphasizes national unity and leadership performance and patriotism. Rwanda has made tremendous progress along this path. So Rwanda was a basket case in 1994. Today they have gone out of that because of some reforms they have done. These three countries are by no means the only models. I'm not advocating that these are the models Nigeria must copy and paste. But I just use it to illustrate that a country is an organic system that we can evolve new ways of doing things and make our country better. As leaders at different levels, we should encourage a healthy conversation on restructuring and reforms that steer national pride and love and faith of our citizens in our beloved country. Nigeria is still the greatest gift history has bestowed on us, and of course the black race, with our huge potential for greatness, prosperity, and happiness for our people. Nigeria as a nation, we can say it's blessed. We are not saying it's 100%. Sometimes we exaggerate what we have. But even if you look at the environment, we have the Atlantic Ocean that most countries are not exposed to the oceans, that we can move from there to any part of the world. And even if you look at the vegetation from the mangrove swamps within the Niger Delta to the rainforest areas, to the Guinea savanna, Sudan savanna, and the Sahel, we have flat lands, and we even have the hilly parts, like Mambila Plateau area, that you can even grow subtropical plants. Of course, in terms of minerals, too, there are all zones of this country have some minerals. Some have been developed, some not yet developed. And the most important thing about Nigeria is that we have the human beings with the very cranial capacities that they are making impact across the world. These human resources can make significant changes. So if we manage ourselves well, it will continue to be a pride to the world and the black race. But like every other nation, Nigeria is a project in progress and should confidently discuss our experiences and fashion out solutions to improve on our performance and the well-being of all citizens. We should all do our little best in our little corners to overcome the challenges we face and work hard to reposition our country for a greater and more prosperous tomorrow for our children and grandchildren. This cannot be achieved without deliberate effort to promote national unity and love of country by all our leaders and our citizens. We owe ourselves and the coming generations a duty to reduce the bile and embrace one another so that restructuring for a better and greater Nigeria can be meaningful and can guarantee the nation's economic development and the welfare of our citizens. We should never lose hope in our nation, for the future is still bright. with the robust character of our people and the unbeatable resilience of our spirit, I have no doubt that our country will continue to be great. May this platform shed more light on our path forward as a nation. As chairman of today's event, I'm not meant to really discuss the issue of restructuring because the eminent people selected are those who will really lead us through. My duty is to open. So I hereby declare open to this dialogue, and I believe these three eminent Nigerians will interrogate this topic that all of us will be proud. I thank you all.
Another round of applause, please, for His Excellency, the former President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, Dr. Goodluck Ebele Jonathan.
I thank the management and staff for the use of the for the opportunity. Because of the limited time available to speak out for the
topic, I shall adopt a very simple question and answer format in dealing with my presentation. One, why should we restructure? We should restructure because the constitutional history of Nigeria shows that the only constitutions of the Federal Republic of Nigeria made by all the ethnic groups in Nigeria were the 1960 and 63 constitutions. In 1954, the Lillington Constitution made regional governments independent of the central government in respect of subjects and legislative powers allocated to them. It also established a unicameral legislature for the federal government and each of the three regional governments. Lagos was taken out of control of any regional government and made the federal capital territory. Regional public services were established in each of the three regions. The judiciary was reorganized so as to establish regional judiciaries, while autonomy was granted to the southern Cameroons, which up to 1954 was part of a larger Nigeria and the northern Cameroons. For the first time, ministers were given specific portfolios. The Lillington Constitution thus became the transition instrument to Nigeria's independence in 1960, under a federal structure with democratically elected federal and regional legislatures. From July 25th to 26th of 1963, a national constitutional conference was held in Lagos. This conference led to the enactment of the 1963 Constitution. The Constitution replaced the position of Governor General appointed by the British monarch under the 1960 arrangement with the position of a president elected directly by members of the Nigerian Federal Legislature. In place of the Privy Council, the Federal Supreme Court became designated as the final appellate judicial authority over any person or matter in Nigeria. Between 1979 and 1999, Nigeria's democracy was overthrown in a military coup in January 1966. Between 1966 and October 1979, Nigeria was ruled by three military regimes. The last one under General Obasanjo bequeathed Nigeria with a presidential constitution which overthrew our parliamentary system of government. The Constitution was drafted by 49 members out of 50 members of the Constitution Drafting Committee. Their final draft was reviewed and amended by the Armed Forces Ruling Council that issued a decree enacting it into law. During Generals Babangida and Abacha's military administrations, there were some amendments to the Constitution which were not carried into a civilian democracy until General Abdusalami Abubakar assumed office and appointed a Justice Niki Toby committee, which after a tour of the country made a draft constitution, which is Supreme Military Council of 24 officers, chosen without recourse to geographical representation, amended as they pleased, and promulgated into law. That constitution is now the law that is in use in Nigeria. The 1999 constitution is therefore adjudged by many legal experts as not autochthonous. This means that it is not derived from the people. It was not made by their elected representatives. It was not subjected to a plebiscite or referendum. In law, it is not cognizable as a legal constitutional document, yet it remains the ground norm, our source of binding authority as to how our country should be governed. The 1999 Constitution overthrew the sovereignty of regions over their natural resources and domestic security, unleashing in the process an unprecedented fall of educational standards, domestic security, and economic well-being. Under the 1960 Constitution, the 3 and subsequently 4 regions of Nigeria were viable and promoted sustained development in all sectors of the economy. In northern Nigeria, groundnut pyramids grew exponentially, cotton mills, tin, animal husbandry, and grain thrived. Ahmadu Bello University grew into a repeatable university, boasting of one of the best architectural faculties in Africa. In western Nigeria, cocoa production flourished and financed free education at all levels, leading to the establishment of University of Ife with internationally renowned pharmacy department. The first television station in Africa was established at Ibadan, and the first stadium in Africa in the same city, Ibadan. Import substitution industries grew, extending to Lagos, and increasingly became the industrial hub of West Africa. In eastern Nigeria, the first iron and steel complex in Black Africa was built in Enugu. The second cement factory in Kalago, the first glass factory in Emene, the second beer brewery in Umuahia, and 2 soft drink plants in Onitsha and Enugu. An American-oriented University of Nigeria grew, threatening the pioneer status of University College Ibadan, which is my alma mater, then a campus of University of London. Military rule and imposition of non-federal constitution changed all that. The unity system of government destroyed competition among regions. It led to a scramble for our collective resources and the foundation of unbridled corruption in government. Quota, as opposed to merit, became the primary consideration for appointment to public offices, to the extent that it was enshrined in our constitution. States and local governments, which did not reflect any demographic equality, were created and used as yardstick for representation in the legislature and the executive. Nigeria began to slide. The following examples will jolt you. Last year, the World Poverty Clerk described Nigeria, and I quote, Nigeria's population in extreme poverty has risen by 5.7 people per minute. And as the country with the most people living in extreme poverty in the world, at 82 million people living in extreme poverty, thereby overtaking India, which was previously the world's country with the most extreme poverty. Second example, Nigerian economy has grossly underperformed relative to her enormous resource endowment and her peer nations. It has the 6th largest reserves in the world, oil reserves in the world, gas reserves, sorry. It is endowed in commercial quantities with about 37 solid mineral types and has a population of over 170 million people. Yet economic performance has been rather weak and does not reflect these endowments compared with emerging Asian countries, notably Thailand, Malaysia, India, China, Indonesia, that were behind Nigeria in terms of GDP per capita in 1970. These countries have now transformed their economies and are not only miles ahead of Nigeria, but are also major players in the global economic arena. In 2017, a Japanese, Oshimaya an Indian, writing in worldatlas.com, ranked Nigeria as the world's greatest producers of cassava with 47.4 million tons, followed by Thailand with 30.2 million, and Indonesia with 23.9 million tons, and Brazil with 21.4 million. Cassava is the basis of a multitude of products, including food, flour, animal feed, ethanol, alcohol, starches, fossilizing paper and textiles, sweeteners, prepared foods, and biodegradable products. In none of these exports is Nigeria a leading exporter. Instead, Nigeria is a huge importer of ethanol made out of cassava. Nigeria is the 2nd largest grower of tomatoes in Africa, coming after Egypt. Notwithstanding this, we are the highest importer of tomato puree in Africa. Nigeria is the 3rd largest grower of cattle in Africa and the largest grower in sub-Saharan Africa, with an estimated annual production of 19.8 million cattle. Cynthia Ebobo, writing in Business Day, July 6, 2019, reports that Nigeria spent 1.3 billion annually on importation of dairy products like milk, yogurt, and cheese. She quoted Bello Omar, Nigeria's then Permanent Secretary for Ministry of Agriculture, who at the 4th Global Dairy Conference of Africa in Abuja said, and I quote, Nigeria produces 30% of dairy in West Africa and 0.01% of global dairy at the production capacity of 50,000 liters daily, less than 20% of local potential. Nigeria is also the world's 6th producer of crude oil in the world. In spite of this, NNPC reported that Nigeria consumes between 55 million and 60 million liters of petrol every day, and that the federal government is expected to spend 750.8 billion on petrol subsidy in 2020. In March 2019, Punch newspapers published that Nigeria spent 2.95 trillion to import petroleum motor spirit, also known as petrol, in 2018. This was an increase of 50% from the previous year. Data from the Pipelines and Product Marketing Company, a subsidiary of NNPC, indicates fluctuating monthly consumptions. In January 2018, PMS import averaged 56.5 million liters per day. In February, it jumped to 8.4 million liters per day. In March, it stood at 66.8. In April, 70.7 million. May, 36.7 million. 34.5 million in June, 36.5 million liters per day in July, and 58.4 in August, and 59.8 in September. These fluctuations had nothing to do with changes in domestic demand. They were largely attributable to cross-border smuggling because of dishonesty, poor border security, and differential in price between Nigeria and other neighboring countries, making it difficult to sanitize our fuel supply and distribution metrics. This high cost of importation and high subsidy payments to make pump price affordable is a sad story of a country that, in spite of being the 6th largest producer of crude oil, cannot produce petrol at an affordable price, nor prevent subsidized and imported fuel from being smuggled into neighboring countries and sold at higher prices. Looking at our economy holistically, the following indicators between 2014 and 2018 tell our performance history. In terms of foreign capital investment, we dropped from $5 billion in 2014 to $2 billion in 2018. Unemployment grew from 6% to 23% between 2014 and 18. Inflation from 8 to 11%. GDP growth fell from 6 to 2%. Debt to GDP rose from 12% to 25% and now 35.1%. Oil revenue to GDP grew from 7.6 in 2008 to 8.73 now. Debt service to revenue grew from 27% in 2004 to 60% in 2018 and 99% today. Bloomberg Economics African Performance Rank gave us a positive from 12th country to the 25th. World Bank Ease of Doing Business was the one we did well, from 147 to 14th. World Economic Forum Competitiveness from 127th country to 115. And Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, we fell from 136 to 144. The rest of the macro statistics you can educate yourself on in pages 10 and 11. And I move on to page 12. What general deductions can we make from here? External debt accumulation has seen federal government external debt grow from $10.7 billion in 2015 to $21 billion, up by $10.3 billion, 135% growth rate. Domestic debt has moved from 8.3 trillion in 2015 to 12.7 in 2008, a whooping 44% in 3 years. Cost of servicing of federal government debts have grown from 32.7% in 2015 to 61.5% in 2017. Our daily production of oil has moved from 2.8 million barrels per day in 2011 to 1.174 million barrels in 2020. America has discovered a new oil production technology called shale oil production, based on the liquefying of rocks and similar hydrocarbons. Similarly, energy production from solar and waste has improved exponentially over the past 2 years. China and OECD countries have also put a deadline of 2020 to 2024 for cessation of production of machines dependent on fossil oil. Right now, in Germany and China, demand for electric cars have surpassed demand for cars operated on fossil oil, that is to say, our crude oil. Bloomberg predicts that in the next 6 months, America's production of shale oil will increase to 12 million barrels per day if it survives the low demand occasioned by coronavirus crisis. It's also predicted last year that following the price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia, world oil price will fall to $30 per barrel. It actually fell following the COVID crisis, but has risen to $50 per barrel following the present winter season. In the face of this grim economic reality, the Population Reference Bureau predicts that Nigeria will in 2050 become the world's fourth largest population, with a population of 397 million, coming after China, India, and the United States of America. This is only about 29 years away. Any other country in our situation would have declared a state of emergency long ago to plan for the day oil price will fall. Saudi Arabia, knowing this, is investing $110 billion to develop its estimated 200 trillion cubic feet of wet gas by 2036. When completed, it will provide $8.6 billion annual income and add $20 billion annually to its gross domestic product. This is apart from the production boost its economy will receive from an increased, cheaper, and more diverse source of energy. Right now, research has reached an advanced stage in the United States of America on a new all-solid hybrid solar base on organic, inorganic metal halide called perovskite, which, using solar power technology, has the capacity of turning sunlight into energy and expanding the science of medical imaging in newer and more profound dimensions. The photoelectric power conversion efficiency of perovskite solar cells has increased from 3.8% in 2009 to 22.1% in 2006, making these solar cells the best potential candidate for the new generation of solar cells to replace traditional silicon solar cells in future. Light absorption and photoelectric conversion has become better, more efficient, and a threat to oil-based economy. Research is also advanced in the United States and Europe on 5G technological telecommunications, which will achieve an improved quality and speed of internet communication that will promote new models of self-driving cars, better movie downloads, improved road navigation, and a new medical diagnostic tool called the tricoder. The tricoder is like a telephone. If you exhale from your mouth into it, it will diagnose 43 possible diseases in your body instantaneously. Now, tricoder. Now, China is already developing 5G technology through its mega telecommunications company called Huawei. A new telephone battery called graphene batteries will be developed soon to replace lithium batteries. These graphene batteries will charge in 20 minutes instead of the average 90 minutes for conventional lithium batteries. It can stand 1,500 charge cycles instead of the 300 to 500 cycles of lithium batteries. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently informed the world of his country's new digital explorations. Apart from discovering the cure for cancer and the capacity to make life interminable, Israel can, by drone technology, determine the chemical deficiency of a plant in a farm without setting its foot on the farm. It can also cure deficiency by drone technology. The United States has developed this drone technology to the point where it's able to destroy an Iranian general in a foreign country without moving out of Washington. Now, UNICEF has told us that there are 12 million Nigerian children out of school. And this is possible because of the system of government that we have. We can restructure to revamp our agricultural potentialities. When I speak of restructuring, some of my northern Nigerian friends have suggested to me that I do not want the North to partake in the oil revenue of Nigeria. Well, I have just outlined the indisputable fact that oil is a fast-drying resource for earning of foreign exchange. The truth is that most reliable source of revenue now is agriculture. Netherlands is today the largest exporter of food in the world. Its cross-sectional area is about half the size of Niger State, and is the world's greatest exporter of potatoes. Its revenue from vegetables and dairy contribute more than 100 billion annually to its economy. The secret is education, better mechanized farming, and what have you. Northern Nigeria is Nigeria's greatest treasure of agriculture. It is blessed with diverse livestock production, capacity for dairy production, various tubers of tomatoes, yam, cassava, cocoyam. Poultry growth is rich, and its vegetable and fruit production in Nigeria's different weather conditions are outstanding and plentiful. In a restructured Nigeria, Northern Nigeria will earn more from food production than Netherlands. We must restructure because our current electoral system is dysfunctional. I watched with complete and utter disappointment social media films of underage children voting in the last local government elections in Kano last week. No reasonable government will tolerate this kind of brigandage. If we had stronger regional governments, it would perhaps manage the situation better. Nigeria is the only country where you have to wait for sometimes up to 1 year to have an electoral dispute resolved in the courts. We have unwittingly dragged the credibility of law courts into disrepute so that journalists and lawyers alike cast aspersions on them. We must restructure to reduce insecurity in our country. While I was working on this speech on Monday, I paused to read the news for the day, and I saw the following headlines. Bandits kill octogenarian 14 in Zamfara, Kaduna attacks. Cops arrest police sergeant for robbery in Port Harcourt. Robbers kill 22-year-old IT prodigy in Lagos. Gunmen hack partly priest to death. Kidnap brother in Niger State. Bandits abduct 17 in Niger, all in one day. While several other crimes may have been unreported, the continued menace of Boko Haram in the northeast and consequent decapitation of our civilians and soldiers continues unabated. The influx of Fulani insurgents in northwest Nigeria and numerous kidnaps of leading personalities appear beyond redemption. Now, when do we restructure? We must do all we can to restructure before the next civilian election in 2023. Because the level of dissatisfaction in the country, as evidenced by the last EndSARS protest, gives one the impression that any delay may lead to a mass boycott or disruption of the next elections, to the point that we may have a more serious constitutional crisis of a nation without a government. Finally, how do we restructure? To restructure, Nigeria needs a constitutional conference of all ethnic groups in Nigeria. To use the current National Assembly as a forum for constitutional amendment grants a tacit recognition of the overthrow of our democratic norms by the enthronement of a military constitution by which they are composed. The outcome of the Constitutional Conference must be subjected to a public plebiscite in which all adult Nigerians have rights to vote. The process should be open. It should be supervised by international agencies to validate its transparency and therefore usher new elections based on its provisions and structure. This process, in my view, will ultimately refocus our country, breed a democratic culture that emphasizes more on selfless service rather than individual enrichment, promote genuine unity instead of ethnic bigotry, and challenge our capacity to exploit our abundant potentialities to make life more abundant for our people. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Chief John Nwodo, for that very comprehensive, even perhaps historical look at the issues that restructuring bring to the fore when we discuss Nigeria.
The story I'm going to say to add the one what I said about the background to the problem of the country. And what the introductory statement. Well, I'd like to make one point clear from the beginning. Restructuring is not a political philosophy. And people often get confused about what we mean by it. Restructuring, we are saying, is just the back to restructure the country back to federalism as we had it at independence. Because that is the constitution that the founding fathers of this country agreed to. Now, Are we emphasizing restructuring now? Because the constitution we are using now is a fraudulent constitution. It is not the constitution of the people. And that point must be made clear. You should not confuse it with whatever we are saying. The question you ask us is restructuring. Why? Restructuring is not a philosophy. Restructuring is just to say we want the constitution that everybody agrees to that give peace and unity in the country. And when we talk of federalism, there's a political philosophy behind it. It is not just a philosophy that just sits from the air. It is a well-known principle that in a heterogeneous society like Nigeria, the unity form of government that we are operating now will not work, and it has not worked. So part of the question is, why restructuring now? Restructuring is important now, which is back to federalism, because the constitution we are having now is a fraudulent constitution describing the constitution of the people being federal, which is not. We the people who didn't make it. And what is John Wood replied to that it was the constitution of Abdullah. It is not the constitution our founding fathers gave us. It is not the constitution and Saudana Sokoto, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and Shifaulo agreed to at independence. They summoned all the representatives of the country to London by the Chancellor of the Secretary of State. Because there was crisis. There was crisis the fact that I can never work because of the multi-ethnic and multicultural nature of our society. That is the basis of why we must have a federal constitution. And the founding fathers agreed to this. And we are having it all peacefully. All the problems we are having in Nigeria today is because of the fraudulent constitution that we are having. That just makes the fact that all the trouble with this, that, we have had enough of it. There is not anybody talk about something today that even members of this parliament have not said that you don't know. It is lack of courage, lack of the will to keep us together. That is what we discuss now. Why do we have restructuring now? Why must we go back to federalism now? Because the constitution we have now is not working. And you go to John Wood has already made clear how that's not been working, how we have been wasting time on the possible. That is why we must go back to federalism. That is why, because it is fraudulent, it is not our own constitution. I like to emphasize that. It is the military that imposed it on us after the coup of 1966. And the question of going back to federalism is not a new one. Even before the 1999 Constitution, before the handing over back to civilian regime, we have been talking about it, we have been emphasizing it. And that was the basis of the NADECO at that time. When the British said they are sending us back to civilian rule, the progressive then said no. They are sending us back to civilian rule, send us back to the constitution you met us. That is what we had this. That is what we are running before the military came. The constitution then gave us such freedom and autonomy in the federating unit that I will not have liberty side job in the West. Savannah asked Amadu Bello Stadium. We built it Amadu Bello built Amadu Bello University. Dr. Management agricultural progress. We were making progress under a federal constitution. There was the question of revenue allocation, which is the problem the South is having now under this regime and before. And that has been solved. since 1954, before independence. What we call resource control now is derivation. And we agreed then on 50% derivation. By that time, the northern region had 50% because of their granules. The western region had 50% because of their cocoa. The eastern region had their 50% because of their palm kernel. And we are moving on. And I was able to put the federal, to do the free education because of the autonomy, the education of police and everything, which we are now agitating for. Then we work out to go back to that. We have peace and in this society. And those of us who are anxious about the country remaining one, are emphasizing that let us go back to federalism. Unfortunately, our colleagues who already know, even some of our own members who came into office through the clamor for federalism, through the clamor for restructuring, now deny. But I would like to talk about restructuring. So my friends from the north, they say, we want to break the country. So people fought for it now, they don't understand. Anybody opposing to restructuring, which is going back to federalism, that is not who want to break the country now. Because the emphasis I believe for this seminar, why restructuring now? The country at info, we are all now at the civil war. And not the people that agreed to the military that is killed against second. And all the affection, all the dictatorial thinking and provision of the constitution that makes it autocratic. Under this constitution will be changed now. If the most powerful president in the whole world, that is where we should address ourselves. That is why he is able to put all the important offices in the country in the village. When you talk about you are trying to organize it. Where will you have a unity in the country where the peace is one of the it's not possible. The question of security now that the book was referring to is because that problem of global security under this problem of they have no authority. So that is what we must address now. If they are not going to be a talking shop, and people were just by there is President Buhari to restructure the country now. Because the way we are going, we're talking of I don't believe in it. And you confuse the issue, they are now telling us where the president will go. That is not the question now. The question now is to keep the country forced together. When you have the country together, then we can decide where the people go. Let us make the question of presidency constitutional, not the question of gentleman agreement. And why would you make gentleman agreement over what the power of life? Be a member of this country, be an equal partner in the federation. It is this constitution that made the Northern did not believe that if they don't support anybody, they can't be president. And the constitution now. All the agitation in Eastern region is doing about celebration is because they feel excluded under the constitution. What is the the South, why are they clapping secession? They take a pit, you take out their money from their oil, you take it to the north. If they have been having it on the derivation, we had it before, there have been no trouble. The way that happens for people, why? Because the constitution is not cited. Who can they want to take me to jail, to the cleaner? I only hope the progressive element is enough. We persuade President to get it to now, because we have party now. Because before everything goes to basics, let us sit down. Sometimes they say, oh, you don't like it. If you don't like the grammar of federation, everybody can go his own way. But no, let us work together and Martin, the chairman of today, it is best when we're there. Only the late. Unfortunately, if he has introduced if I set up the commission at the right time, it would have been presented. But it's not okay. The first opportunity we had to rectify this was to open the job. You should have done this constitution and put on in the right path. All the conveniences we have been having, all the clamor, all the criticism and the positive that we are having would have been avoided, which has given back to bad blood in the country. So I believe it is not a long job for why do we have constitution, why do we repeat it? It is why we must have it now to save the country. That is where we are. That is the question to say. We have combined our energy on transferring President Buhari to do that now for the peace and quiet of the country. Now, the same way I have mentioned, it is now. It must be done before the election. Anybody talking about the election without changing this constitution is just wasting time. It doesn't love this country. And as I said even before today, is the change of the constitution now. And then people say, when? They say, how are you going to do it? Simple. If there's a way, if there's a way, there's a way. When President Fulanis leaving the office, he handed the document of 2014 election to General Buhari. And he told him, this is the most important document I'm giving you. Unfortunately, General Buhari has the private engagement. He said he put it in the archive. That is why we are sending today. 51 years after independence, we are still deciding what kind of government we have. Those who got independence as an organization country, they are advancing. We are still discussing, we should read it together. We are still discussing how we should read together. That is the purpose of this seminar. Not that talking about why it be or how it has happened, we already know that. Let President Jonathan persuade his colleague to tell him that the path he gave in 2014 should be followed. If he believes he doesn't want to follow the 2014 election, let him set up his own committee so that let us agree on the constitution and move on. And if he believes that is too much, you can tell the committee to examine 2014, take away what you don't want there. Put in what you want there, and move on for unity in peace.
Thank
so
you so
that
much.
we continue to rule us under this constitution, promising time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I think also talking about that constitution, what are the inputs of the thing? We have passed that, we have had enough of it. The question now is to save the unity of this country by going back to federalism, because that is the most suitable constitution for a general society like ours. Evidence has shown that. Two, the constitution we're having now is a problem constitution. It's not our constitution. Because you're asking why is it now? It's not our constitution. It's not everybody testify to that. It is not working. If you are already if you don't know that we are already in a failed state, to save us from being failed, do impress on President Buhari to change the constitution now to a constitution that everyone will agree to. We're not a constitution where we discriminate against the sector of the country, not the.
Thank you so much, Chifayo Adebanjo.
Panelists, the moderator, and distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I thank the Daily Trust organization for inviting me to participate in today's Daily Trust Dialogue. Having listened to the co-panelists, I'm pondering as to whether I should just keep my paper aside and respond to the issues that they have raised, or whether I should stick to my paper and where necessary then address the issues that they have raised. I think it's only fair that I stick to my paper, and in this presentation I begin with a general introduction, and then I try to look at the Nigerian context and I made a very brief and short analysis of the Nigerian context before attempting to address the questions that have been posed to us, which is restructuring in Nigeria, why, how, and when. I think it's important in this kind of discussion to recognize that federalism is the principle, some would say a conceptual or institutional framework, which defines the division of authority among national and subnational governments in a country. A country in which authority is divided between the national and subnational governments is referred to as a federation, or as operating a federal system. And it is also important to recognize that regardless of whether it is the subnational governments which were priorly independent that came together to form and create the federation, or whether they were forced by historical circumstances into such a union, the subnational governments have, by legal constitutional arrangement, become the federating units, which means that they have coordinate or at least shared responsibilities with the national government. So the major objective of a federal system is to bring about non-conflictual management of diversity and to ensure sharing of power and the resources so that the country or the federation can have stable societal progress and socio-economic development. Both in law and in practice, most federations strive and take care to ensure equity and justice in the division of authority and resources among the federating units and in compliance with the rule of law. Because it is only by doing this that a conducive environment for peaceful coexistence could be nurtured, and it is the only way through which proactively irredentist tendencies can be blocked in order to facilitate societal progress and development. So technically and substantively, Nigeria is a federation and operates a federal system with states as federating unit currently. We may have had regions, but we moved into states, and currently as we speak, under the current constitutional arrangement, the states are the federation unit. However, among federations that currently exist in the world, and according to the Forum of Federations, there are now about 25 federal systems in the world, but they are so diverse and complex that these 25 countries actually represent about 40% of the world population. So about 25 countries representing about 40% of the world population are federations. And Nigeria is one of them, but regrettably, Nigeria among them is one of the worst models of political accommodation of diversity, as well as power and resource sharing. And I think if we are looking for why the need for restructuring, it is important to bear this in mind. We have a federation, but compared with other federations in the world, we are not achieving or even striving seriously to achieve what the objective of a federation is, of establishing a federal system is. And that is to ensure good, effective management of diversity for peaceful coexistence in order to ensure stable socioeconomic development of citizens in such a federation. Of course, there are no perfect federations, as for that matter, there is no true federalism. Every federation is a product of the dynamics of its historical evolution and the intergroup relations. However, the better the framework or structure of the management of diversity, power, and resources in a federation, the more stable, peaceful, and socio-economically developed would such a federation be. And this is a global experience among these 25 or so countries in the world that are federations. To develop, to have peace amidst diversity, you need to have an effective strategy and structure for the management of diversity, for political accommodation, for power sharing and resource sharing, as well as the sharing of responsibilities between the national government and the subnational governments in the federating units. What accounts for the difference? What accounts for the difference between those countries that have effective management of diversity and are therefore stable and able to develop socioeconomically in their countries, and those that have poor management of diversity and therefore have challenges in their socioeconomic development, are two intervening variables. The first variable difference is what is called elite consensus. They may not be perhaps seeing my face, but I'm sure they should be hearing me because all the others spoke with their masks on.
Maybe speak a bit louder.
Okay, I will remove it, don't worry. All right. So basically the point that I'm making is that for a country such as Nigeria that has poor management of diversity, that is unstable because of this poor management of diversity, that has an imbalance in the sharing of power and the resources. Two things are important for us to be able to improve the situation and to become a more effective federation. And those are, one, elite consensus, and secondly, good democratic governance. And in Nigeria, these are serious challenges, and to my mind, they are the major obstacles to peace, to peaceful coexistence, to stability, and to socio-economic development and equality of opportunity in our country. Therefore, for its stability, progress, and development as a modern nation state, Nigeria's current federal structure needs improvement, needs refinement, indeed needs some form of what can be called restructuring. And of course, there are many reasons which few Nigerians can contest as to why we got to where we are. One, of course, is that we know we have had a long history of military rule. And this long history of military rule has a culture associated with it, which is not democratic, which is generally authoritarian, and which is centrist in terms of hierarchy of authority. So in a federal system, when you have military regimes, authority is centralized. And over time, power and resources have become concentrated in the national government at the expense of the states. And unfortunately, this negative consequence of prolonged military rule has also been combined by bad and poor governance, in spite of the fact that we have made a transition to democratic governance. And these are very fatal combinations for a federal system of government. You know, to have centralized authority in a federal system where resources and power are centralized, and then to have bad governance at the national level, then obviously is a recipe for violence, for conflicts, for disagreements, and for irredentist tendencies for the dismemberment of a country. And that is what we are witnessing in this country. So if we want improve the federal system, and maybe because of the frustration with what has been happening in Nigeria, a few people probably have already reached that extremist position to say that, look, Nigeria is no longer viable. We want to opt out of Nigeria. You know, but I believe that a sober analysis would show us the best ways and the means and the strategies that can help us restructure the federation, improve upon the management of diversity and the power sharing and the resources, so that we can have a country that we can all be proud of as citizens, and so that our society, on the basis of stability and peaceful coexistence, can develop and actualize the aspirations, the needs and the aspirations of the Nigerian people. So I think I will skip the contextual analysis and only make some few references to it. But I think what is clear is that when you look at the Nigerian context, not only is there that long history of military rule, but even in the 20 years of transition to democracy, we have not made much progress in terms of good governance. We unfortunately have a situation in which a group or a segment of the elite has captured political power, particularly at the central level, and have commandeered resources and have proceeded to not only personalize federal resources, but to also mobilize ethnicity and religion in order to sustain themselves in power or to retain power. And of course, not only those in government, but there are many associated interest groups that are nurtured by this control of resources, who also support that idea of mobilizing religion and ethnicity. If you are part of it, then everything is fine. If you are out of it, then you are marginalized and you want restructuring or dismemberment of the country. That is at the level of mobilization of the ordinary people. So it's very, very important that we recognize this and also factor it into analysis as to what needs to be done in order to improve the situation. In the Nigerian Fourth Republic, that is since 1999, there have been two major undertakings to generate elite consensus, if not national consensus, on how to address outstanding burning national issues, including primarily the national question and the desirable structure of the federation. For example, there was a political reform conference in 2006. Many people tend to forget that, under the Obasanjo government. And there was also the national conference, which has been mentioned under President Jonathan in 2014. The report of each of these conferences has many good and rich recommendations for addressing persistent national challenges. Regrettably, both have remained unconsidered and unimplemented, particularly by the dominant faction or segment of the elite that has been in governance. As governance increasingly becomes poor and bad, as Nigerian politics slides backward from democratic to undemocratic authoritarian modes of governance, and consequently as the country is plunged into uncontrolled ethno-religious violence and other forms of criminality, the demands for restructuring have become vociferous, with even extremist irredentist demands for the dismemberment of the country. So the way things are going, Nigerians in general and the elite in particular need to engage with the issue of restructuring more seriously and purposefully and begin to address it. So I say begin to address it because, again, when people discuss restructuring and want it now, we tend to forget that things have been so bad for so long that there is no way you can, within a short period of time or with, what do you call this, of hand, solve the challenges. So we have to recognize that having allowed things to be so bad for so long, we also need to have a systematic, strategic approach to how we can resolve the issue of structuring in this country so that it can be beneficial, so that it can be sustainable, and so that it can ensure enduring peace, peaceful coexistence and stability in our country. But we must also recognize that restructuring alone, and I think both President Jonathan and Chief Nwodo have made that point, restructuring alone cannot also solve all the problems of our country. In fact, we have to combine restructuring with reforms in governance in order to ensure that actually Nigeria becomes stable, the issue of feelings of marginalization are addressed, the issue of equality of opportunity is promoted, the issue of vandalization of resources and their diversion for personal use rather, or selfish use rather than national or communal use is addressed. These are fundamental issues. And unless, if we don't focus attention on how to combine the two and be able to do them systematically over a period of time, then obviously you can restructure, but the same problems will remain. So it's very, very important we bear this in mind. So I think I will stop at this with the contextual analysis. I understand I have less than 10 minutes, so let me just very, very quickly, the paper I hope will be circulated and people will read it. So why are there demands for restructuring? I think one, first of all, as I said, there is heightened mobilization and politicization of ethnic, regional, religious identities by politicians generally, but also by so-called opinion leaders or community leaders that are associated with those in power. Secondly, there are indeed actual illustrations of how some people or some groups of people are marginalized or are made to feel marginalized, whether it is in federal appointments or in federal projects or in inclusion or inclusiveness in governance. There are, and people can easily point to evidence of marginalization. Now, of course, this evidence, on balance, may be marginal or minimal, but the perception of marginalization created by these incidences is more dangerous in the mobilization of ethnic and religious sentiments. And I think that is what is really happening in our country. Somebody who has been a politician and who let me call them career or professional politicians, who no longer have access in governance, now become advocates of marginalization. And if they were to be included tomorrow, then they will now become advocates of unity and accommodation and perseverance and so on. And we see it all the time, particularly given the way in which politicians move from one party or jump from one party to another. But for the ordinary people, because they listen to what you say, then obviously once you create that feeling and perception in them, it's very, very difficult to cure it. And that is how it finds expression in ethno-religious violence and even in the other forms of criminality which we now see. So there are many things I have listed, about six things that actually facilitate this demand for restructuring. So what should restructuring entail? And now you begin to enter into a situation in which the more you hear, the less you understand. There are all sorts of notions and definitions of restructuring. For some people, like Chief Adebanjo, restructuring is going back to the 1966 constitutional arrangement, okay? And if you don't do that, you are not doing restructuring. And it is, one can deduce from the position articulated, it is the only solution, this or nothing. Other people, perhaps since 1995, the Constitutional Conference established by late General Abacha have moved from return to 1966. They say, okay, let's have geopolitical zones. Rather than the 4 regions, let us now have 6 regions based on the so-called geopolitical zones. And then you devolve power and responsibilities and resources to those zones. And of course, more recently, others have been demanding for not a return to region or creation of new regions, but what they call the 1967 to I think 1976 or 77 12 states structure. They say, well, it's difficult to go back to the regions and is also perhaps unrealistic to create new geopolitical zones and get the states to surrender their resources. And so let's go back to the 12-state structure. It's like meeting the other 2 demands halfway. Others argue that retain the existing state structure of 36 states. The only problem people speak about it is that some of the states look unviable, and a lot of the challenges that these states experience is not because of the structure of the states, but because of the reckless mode of governance by those who preside over these states. So retain the state structure, improve good governance, but then devolve additional powers and resources from the concentrated power and the resources at the federal level to the states so that they can have more resources, they can have more responsibilities, and they can become more viable, and with improvement in governance and more credible people of integrity getting into politics and assuming positions at the state level, then you will have a better process and a better system. And to be honest, personally, I believe that that is what we need to do. Because I have been asking people who want a return to the 4 regions, or even who want the creation of 6 geopolitical zones, how do you accommodate the relative autonomy that many people in these existing states have enjoyed and are loving, into surrendering these and coming into some regional groupings? Remember that the initial objective of creation of states is to assuage the fears of minorities. And that's why you created states, and then once you created 12 states, other new minorities and new majorities emerged in those states, and then demands for creation of other states, and that's how we now got to the 36 state structure. So is it conceivable that when you create regions, that all these states can surrender their relative autonomy and now become appendages to a regional government? And I think it's unlikely, for the simple reason, look, I come from Kebbi, and the Kebbi was part of the former Northwest state, which was divided into Niger and Sokoto state, which subsequently became Sokoto and Kebbi state, and which presently is now Niger, Sokoto, Zamfara, and Kebbi state. So even if you just want to go back to the 12-state structure, you want all these other states to surrender their relative autonomy and become subsumed under a new regional structure. I'm talking about Kebbi. By the time you begin to move into other areas, take the southeast or even the southwest, where the demand for return to regions is vociferous, it's unrealistic, because the same people, I can't imagine people in Ekiti or Ondo state wanting to return to the former old western region, when they know that in terms of power and the resources, they will now become the new minorities. So let us be realistic in terms of how we want to address these challenges. And by the way, maybe it's a different, I think I've taken more time than I'm allowed. So my argument is that we need to restructure, but restructuring should address imbalance of power, inequities in resource distribution in the existing 36 states, and the best way to do it is to look at the legislative lists and deconcentrate power from the federal government, which has been concentrated under military rule, and spread it back to the states, which is what federations normally do, because there are so many things under that federal legislative list, which in normal federations, unlike ours, are actually the responsibilities of the federating units. Education, health, urban and housing, and many others like that, which have substantial resources, devolve them back to the states and give commensurate resources to the states. But of course, it means that the more resources that go to the local level, the more power at the local level becomes more attractive, the less it becomes more attractive to the central power, and therefore the issues of national marginalization may be reduced. And perhaps, and I believe it will be so, the more resources, the more power are concentrated at the state levels, then the more good people of integrity and who don't think that such resources should be allowed to be vandalized by those who capture power will become involved in local struggles to ensure good governance and to ensure effective utilization. And now many of the states blame the federal government for challenges in education, challenges in healthcare, and so on. By the time you give that responsibilities to the states, any state that cannot take care of its schools or its own clinics, has nobody else to blame. And that is why those who have children and grandchildren and so on in these states will now become more interested, rather than always finding the excuse to accuse the federal government. So restructuring is possible. I believe this can be done between now and 2023, because people want something to be done. Once we begin with that, it will revive hope and confidence in the process, and it will catalyze a new feeling of belonging. And by the time it begins to take root in the states, I believe a lot of the challenges that we face would become reduced. But the key thing is you can't just do that restructuring and ignore improvement in governance. You have to combine the two, and it's possible to combine the two, and I've also discussed it in this paper. When you get it, you can see my ideas. Thank you very much. Sorry, Kaderia.
Well, now we're turning our attention to that Ruga settlement controversy, and I have with me in the studio Mr. Mark Jacob, who is a legal advisor, Middle Belt Forum, a former Attorney General in Kaduna State. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you very much.
I also have with me in the studio Tafidan Isam Mafindi, who is a successful farmer and a cattle rearer. He is a chartered accountant, a retired civil servant, and owns one of the largest private abattoirs in the country. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily, sir.
Thank you very much.
Now, I don't know, gentlemen, what you make of this controversy. Is it needless? Let me start with you, Mr. Mafindi.
It's totally needless, because this thing did not come without a precedent. Immediately after independence, two regions set up livestock developing units. One in Iseyin, around Oyo, by the biggest Yoruba leader, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, the late memory. Then at Gidamwaya, by the late Sir Ahmadu Bello, Sardauna of Sokoto. Both places are still existing, though very little activity was taking place. I can remember when Obasanjo launched his Green Revolution, that's before Shagari, there was a move to create the river basins. And the purpose of the river basins was to make provision for large vast of land for livestock activities to thrive. Immediately after Shagari, immediately after Buhari, General Babangida set up NALDA, and a massive land clearing contracts were given all over the nation. That's why when the presidency was saying there were gazetted land, people were denying. But I stand here to say it's true. There are gazetted lands. Most of those lands were cleared during Babangida regime. And most of them belong to one river basin or the other. When Adeshina became Minister of Agric during Jonathan, I was in one corner of Nigeria doing my agricultural activity. The next thing I heard was